All right, so thank you for joining our recurring learning webinar. This week's topic is going to be on standard case management. In this webinar, we are going to focus on essentially the client intake process. We'll also talk about how to record a visit for your clients. A little bit of a disclaimer, we will be using the link to feed testing server. That means a few things. Number one, the settings that are here in this portal are going to be most likely different from what you have, and that is okay. It's just a matter of settings and preferences. So if you see something in my portal that you would like in yours, definitely that's something that we want to either talk to your network admin about or your account manager about. That can be handled. You might also want to join the administrative settings webinar to learn more about settings. If there is something that you have turned on in your site that is not on in my site, there's nothing wrong, nothing is broken. It's just a matter of settings. And then lastly, I want to let you know that in the testing server, this is the place where people like me, my colleagues, the affectionately called nerds here at Link to Feed use to test and play. So there is a small chance that we might see an error or something during training. That is not anything that you should expect as you use the site on a regular basis, but just something that happens in the testing server. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get logged in here. Before I get logged in, a couple more things I want to point out to you. I am in the testing server, and I can tell that because the banner here says this is the testing server, and it's going to ask me for my email address and my password. Email address will be your username, and we do recommend that you do use a real and live email address for these purposes. If you are ever locked out of your account, you need to reset your password. The I forgot my password is going to send you a reset or password reset link directly to your email address. If this is not a real email address, of course, you do not have that option. The password here is going to be a minimum of 8 characters with at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one special character, and one number. Once all of that is input and correct, we'll go ahead and log in here. That's going to take us to our secondary login screen. So this may be some of your first time seeing this, or it may be something that you're familiar with. Either way, that is okay. The secondary login screen is only going to show up if you are someone that either has network access or has access to more than one location. So that could mean that you are a network admin and you have access to all of the agencies. That might also mean that you are an end user who's a volunteer that works at 2 different locations. And so you just simply need to choose which agency or which location you're logging in at. I'm going to start off at the network level for now, but we'll switch that here in a little bit. I also want to point your attention to this little org tree or org grid here. We're going to see this somewhere else in the Link to Feed site, so I just want you to familiarize your eyes with it. But once again, this is where you would come to choose which location you want to log in at, and not everyone will see this. So if you only have access to more than one location, or I'm sorry, if you only have access to one location, I'm going to go ahead and press continue here. This would be what you would see. So if you only have access to one location, once you put in your username or email address and password, you'd be sent directly here, as there is no option there for you to choose where you want to log in. And we're going to be in case management today, so I'll go ahead and open. All right. I am on the network now, and this is our dashboard. It's going to lay out quite a few things for us here. You do have some flexibility as to what you see on your dashboard. If you're interested in that, the administrative settings webinar will be for you. Now, I started off at the network. Perhaps I wanted to take a look at some reports or manage some settings, whatever the case may be. When I am ready to actually do some client-facing work, I will need to log into an agency. Good news, no, you do not have to log out and log back in order to choose another agency. There's that familiar icon that we saw earlier. So I can go ahead and touch this and choose which location I want to log in at or which agency. I can scroll for 1,000,000 miles to find what I'm looking for. I can also begin to type to find what I am looking for as well. I wanted agency A, and there it is. I'm logged into agency A. For you, this is going to probably be a pantry or a soup kitchen or one of your agencies that is doing the work directly with the client. If you are ever wondering what location you are logged in at, it's always going to appear here in the upper left-hand corner. So we are going to start off by going over this dashboard and what these icons are here. And then we'll get directly into adding a client into the system and all of the information that you'll be able to capture. So once again, I'm here on the dashboard. It's going to show me my announcements. These are messages directly from us at Link to Feed to you. Household served today and individual served today are both at 0. That just means no one has been playing in this particular agency in the test site just yet, but we're going to change that here soon. I can also see the same information in graph form. I also have my search for clients by section, which we'll be playing with a bit today, as well as the most recently accessed clients. So the one thing I want to let you know about this section is that it is user specific. So I am logged in right now. These are the clients that I have accessed within the past 7 days. If I were to log out and one of my colleagues were to log in, this list would change, and that is going to be determined by the clients that you have searched for within the past 7 days. So it is not a full list of all of your clients, just simply the clients that you have most recently been working with. When you are searching for a client, it can be done many different ways. I can search by my client ID, date of birth, name, address, phone number, or barcode if you have this feature enabled. Notice right now that the name section is highlighted, and that is because I have this set as my default. If as an organization or perhaps even as an agency, you decide that you are going to across the board search for clients by the client ID or the date of birth, that can be configured in settings to where that is the tab that is automatically highlighted. But here for the name, I can search by last name, comma first, first, last, or either the first or the last name. And as a rule of thumb, we always want to search for our client before we add them into the system. This is going to be the best way to prevent client duplicates. We also want to keep in mind that asking them a simple question like, have you been here before, might prompt them to say no, but they may be unaware that they have been to another agency within your network and thus are already in the system. So it seems that I am getting less and less creative with these days with the names that I choose. So I'm going to go ahead and just see. All right, looks like I haven't put white paper in here yet. At this point, I'm just looking at things on my desk and adding them. So I don't have this client in the system. I am safe to go ahead and add a new client. So I'm going to go ahead and touch the new client button here. And that is going to take us to the client profile. Before we get started on completing this client profile, let's take a look around and see what we can see. The first thing I notice here is that up top, I am on the personal tab. I can tell that because it is blue. The rest of the tabs are actually grayed out. I'll also notice that the first 4 tabs are numbered. That would be personal, profile, monthly income, and dietary consideration. These are the 4 tabs that make up the client profile. After the client profile is completed, meaning that all 4 of these tabs have been completed, the rest of the tabs here, TFAP all the way to activity, will then be unlocked because these are the tabs that are the actions associated with the client. And of course, we cannot complete an action with this client until first we complete the client profile. Next, we'll see a yellow banner here. And this is going to be a warning letting us know that this client will be removed from the system after 72 hours if not completed. So once again, the client profile consists of 4 pages, and you will have 72 hours to complete this client profile. So let's say that you get to the profile tab, phone rings, you get distracted, you abandon this. You can search for that client and complete the profile up until the 72nd hour. After that point, the profile will disappear if it is not completed. 9 times out of 10, if you are creating a client profile, it is because the client is either sitting directly in front of you or you have them on the phone. 9 times out of 10, you're going to complete this profile in the same moment that you started. But this is one way that the system keeps itself clean by making sure that you don't have incomplete client profiles. We can also see that the client status here is pending. We'll be able to see this change to active as we complete the profile. And in the upper right-hand corner, we see that this client's name at this moment is anonymous client. We'll also see that this changes as I get ready to add the client's name into the system. Beside anonymous client, which is their name, we also have the client ID number. So this ID is associated to the client randomized from Link to Feed. And this is something that is going to happen as soon as you click Add Client, even before the client is associated with a name. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here on creating our client or adding our client profile to the system. The first section here is first visit. It is asking when is the first time that this client has come to this particular organization. And there are a few options that we have here. The most commonly used is going to be today. Usually, if you're adding a client to the system, it is because they are getting ready to receive services for the first time. So if that is the case, we can use today. We also have specific date. This is a great option if you need to backdate. Perhaps you are adding a existing client into your system in Link to Feed that was previously housed in your older system. So we can say when their first visit was, even if that was some time ago or some years ago. And then lastly, we have unknown. Unknown is a great placeholder option. So occasionally there may be an instance where you're adding a client into the system today, but they will not be visiting until later. I see this happen if you are doing perhaps a registration drive when you're first starting off at Link to Feed, or perhaps you're just having someone add their information to the system for a different reason. What unknown will do is the status will stay unknown until their first visit. So right now the status is unknown. If they have their first visit next week, unknown will be overwritten and it will have that date from next week. But for the sake of training, we'll keep it to today. Next, we're going to add the client's name, and we'll notice that this is in a last name first order. And we'll be able to choose the date of birth, keeping in mind that anything that we see with a blue asterisk will be marked as required. The date is going to automatically populate here. And of course, this means that we're not asking the client their age or expected to update this year over year. Because we're putting in the date of birth, it will automatically calculate their age year over year. We have our gender identity. These genders can be customized per your network preferences. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to our administrative settings webinar. I also have this is the date of birth estimated, checkbox for yes, deselect for no. So if there is an instance where you are uncertain of the date of birth, either because the client does not know, or perhaps you just simply have not checked their ID, you can select this. Consent signature is optional, so you may not be used to seeing this, but this consent signature is what is going to happen when you add your client to the system for the first time. If I touch signature, there's going to be this nice disclaimer in here, which was set up in the administrative settings. You're going to choose your signature type, which you also get to choose in administrative settings. And we can go ahead and have our client sign this disclaimer. This generally is just letting them know the purpose for Link to Feed, what we plan to do with their data and what we won't do with their data. Once I sign, I'm going to see today's date, and I can go back and view the signature if need be. Next, it's going to ask for the marital status and the street address. Now, the street address is pretty unique because it is one of the only things that is required that you can completely bypass. So as you can see, all aspects of the street address are marked by the blue asterisk here. But if you have a client that either is experiencing homelessness or otherwise just does not want to answer this question, I can bypass it by saying no fixed address if they are unhoused or experiencing homelessness, or prefer not to answer if they do have a physical address but just wish not to share that information. Notice that with either one of these checkboxes, it is going to gray out the address, and this will be the only way to bypass it. I don't recommend doing that unless there are no other alternatives, because the address is going to be helpful for many other things down the line, whether it is delivery route or just the ability to see your client needs based on zip code. But I'm going to go ahead and put an address in here. Notice as I begin to type, it is going to show me addresses nearby. So I'll go ahead and put that address in. As I add this address, there's going to be a little people icon here, and this represents where your client lives. If I zoom out a bit, I'll also be able to see some house icons. Let's see how far we have to go. In your system, you won't have to zoom out quite this far. What you're seeing here is the addresses of the agencies. And so this might be a helpful tool for you to be able to tell this client, hey, I notice you're coming here, but there is an agency that is closer to your home. If I hover over the house, it's going to tell me exactly what that agency is. Next, we have the housing type. And now we're going to go into email address and phone number. Both of these work the same in terms of functionality, so I'll go over these both at the same time. In my portal, neither the email address or the phone number are required. That might be different in your portal, and that's okay. But essentially what we're going to do here is click the add button to either add an email address or to add a phone number. Now, because the email address and the phone number in my field are not required, I can bypass this section completely and not complete anything and be totally okay. But as soon as I touch this add button, even though the email address is not required, I will not be able to save this page until I add an email address here because I have added or expanded this section. So if you've done that by mistake, we have the trash can here. So if I add email address and I add a few for phone number as well, we'll notice that these work quite the same in that it's giving us the place to put that contact information. The only difference is that the phone number is going to hold a place for the extension, but either way, it's going to ask you what type of email or what type of phone number it is. Next, there are these little radio buttons that appear to the far left of each section. And if I hover over it, we see this word primary. So it is asking me between these two email addresses, which one is primary, and the same for phone number. So we're choosing the primary contact in each category. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go and add fake email addresses and phone numbers, but I do need to go and delete these so that I will be able to save this page. ID type also shares the same functionality. So in this account, it is not required, but I can press the add button here if I need to add an ID type. The selections that we see here are going to be added by your network admin or by you. So you can choose what that is, whether it is a driver's license, whether you're enabling barcode, or maybe even whether you allow a utility bill to be proof of address. Once I choose what that type is, I can then put in what the ID is for barcode, perhaps, or if it's a driver's license, maybe it's something like yes, confirmed, or the initials for the state. We just want to be careful in this confirmation section not to put anything sensitive such as their social security number. Next, it's asking us for languages. Once again, not required in my portal here, but it might be in yours, and that's okay. So what I have here is a list of all of the languages in alphabetical order. If you are ever looking for a language that you don't see here, please do let us know and we can get that added to our list. But above our list of alphabetical order, we have what we call pinned languages. You control your pinned languages in admin settings, but this allows you to take the languages most commonly spoken in your area and put them at the top. So I can choose my language by clicking and scrolling for 1,000,000 miles. I can also begin to type to find what I'm looking for. And as you can see, you can have more than one spoken language for the client. Next, we have the referred by section, meaning how did this client find out about us? And then we have our ethnicity here. So we can go ahead and list our ethnicity. And this is a checkbox, so you can choose as many that apply. Next, we have our self-identity section. This is a great section because I like to call it a catch-all. You'll find that there are many questions that you can ask here in Link to Feed, lots of ways to collect data, probably things that you weren't collecting previous to Link to Feed. But if there is something that is very specific to your organization that you don't see otherwise listed in Link to Feed, the self-identifies as section is going to be for you. You are going to be able to control what these checkboxes see. So this COVID exposure here, this mother of child under 1 year old, these are both things that I have added into the system that are unique to this particular network that you wouldn't see in yours unless you add them. So if there is something that you need to ask of your client that is going to help them help you best serve them, whether that be menstruating, postpartum, that might help you know that you need to provide certain products, diapers, formula, things of that nature. This is a wonderful place to add that. And once again, if you want to know how to add fields like this, the administrative settings is for you. Self-identity is not required in this portal, but it might be in yours. And once again, that's okay. So I can actually skip this if none of these things apply. All right. So I have completed everything on the personal tab. And then we also have the household member, which we'll go over quickly here, but we'll actually double back and play with the household member a bit later on. So I'm going to go ahead and add household member. We'll keep the last name the same. We'll go ahead and add our date of birth, our gender identity, and this is going to be the relationship to the primary. So I can say that the yellow paper is a friend of white paper. I like to point your attention here to ethnicity and self-identity. Sometimes the I likes to go in a row, but this is actually 2 columns. So ethnicity being on one side and self-identity being on the other. I have my ID type here, but it is not required, so I don't have to complete this for my household member if I don't want to. So this is by far nowhere near as much information as I have already added for my primary household member. This is simply the minimum required information for a household member. So I can go ahead and save my changes here. All right. So I can see now here in the household member section, the name yellow paper is a friend, male, the age, and the date of birth. There are some tools here which we'll come back and play with a bit later, but I want you to take note of this little people icon here. We are going to see how that can change a little later on. So at this point, we are done with the personal tab. I can tell that I am on the personal tab right now because this tab is highlighted blue. The profile tab here and the rest are still locked. Once I save this personal tab, we'll see a few things happen. Personal tab will turn green. That lets me know that it's unlocked. Profile tab will turn blue. It will let me know that I am on the profile tab. And congratulations, the personal information tab here is the longest page. The rest of them will be able to breeze by. But before we save, are there any questions on this tab before we move forward? Feel free to put something in chat or come off the mute if you need to.
I have 1 or 2 questions.
Sure.
If one of the first things you demonstrated was the client search. Does that search against the household members as well as the primary person you enter for that household?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So a household member here is going to have its own client ID, and this should be known. A household member is essentially a partially completed profile. So this is not just a list, it is also a client in the system.
Great. Okay, that makes sense. Question number 2, we have an existing database that if we were to start using link to feed, we would want to import into link to feed, but we do not have date of birth as one of those attributes. Do you have any advice in that case?
Date of birth is going to be a required field. So there's 2 things that I'll tell you. We do have the ability to import into link to feed. Date of birth will be required. So that would require a bit of scrubbing of your data and adding that if you want to import. However, I am an account manager outside of doing these webinars, and I always recommend to my clients, unless there's no way around it, to avoid the import. And the reason being is because you've got a brand new squeaky clean blank slate of a system. Unless you are 100% certain that all of your data is 100% accurate, meaning up-to-date information, no inactive or deceased clients, sometimes it's better to just slow it down and re-add that data into the link to feed system so that you know that everything is up to date. And it's just as simple as letting your clients know, hey, everyone, we're transferring to a new system. Please plan an extra 5 to 10 minutes on your next visit as we record your information. So your options would be to either add it slowly over time, knowing that the majority of your clients generally come within 1 to 2 months, or to work with the data that you have from your previous system and put that date of birth in there and kind of work that for some time before you do the import.
Got it.
Any other questions on the personal information tab before we move forward? All right, so I'm going to come down here. I can save changes if I just want to stay on this page, but I want to go to the next page, so I'm going to save and next here. All right, and now I am on the profile tab. Look how much shorter it is than the first one. This is simply going to talk to us about education level and employment. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the highest level of education. I am also going to choose the employment status. This page is nice and simple, sweet and to the point. But the one thing to keep in mind is that this is asking us the education and employment information for white paper here. Notice, by the way, it did change, not for our household member. I'll show you a bit later on how we can complete more information for the household member if you're interested. But any questions on the profile tab before we move forward? All right, so as we can see, just as I said, the personal tab is green. That means it's unlocked. I can navigate back to this tab if I'd like. Profile tab is blue. This is the tab that we are currently on. I have a new option down here, save and previous. That means that I can save and go back to the personal tab. I can save changes and stay directly on this profile tab, but I want to save and next. And when I do that, we'll have 2 green tabs and the monthly income tab will be blue. So we'll go ahead and save and next. All right. And that takes us to the monthly income and expenses tab here. Notice that we still have our name in the upper right-hand corner. We still have this warning, which will stay here until the profile is completed. And there are a few questions that it's asking of us. The first is any household benefits. So this question is asking for the entire household. So does anyone in this household receive these benefits? So I can go ahead and either select what these things are. Because this is a required field, if the household is not receiving any social programs or household benefits, I have some options over here where I can say no benefits. I also have didn't ask, don't know, prefer not to answer as some options as well. There will be 2 ways to track income. I have this on dynamic tracking, which means that it is going to ask me the income per each household member. And even though white paper is my primary, yellow paper here could essentially be the breadwinner. There's not going to be a limit or anything on that. So here I can choose my income type. This can also be controlled by administrative settings, what appears here in this list. And I can list what the income is, monthly income. I can do the same for yellow paper if I'd like. Down at the bottom, it's going to show me my monthly gross income. In this particular portal, I don't have my expenses turned on, but do know that that is an option. It's going to function just like this, but instead of income, it's asking for expenses. If expenses were turned on, you could list things like rent, mortgage, child support, whatever the case may be. It may seem as though someone does not qualify for income-based benefits until you list their expenses, but the expenses will be deducted from the gross income to give you the net income here. I've only listed one income for each one of these household members, but there is no limit and I can add as many. So if they have multiple jobs and you want to capture that, you can. But similar to phone number and email, if I have added this, I will need to put something in here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete. Once again, this is dynamic income tracking, but you can also track it for the household altogether, where it's not going to ask you for the income type. It's just going to be a number field. What is the household income? And you submit that. Now here I also have my primary toggle, but unlike email address and phone number, this is going to be for the household. So if I touch the toggle here and then move down to my other household member, notice it's going back and forth. It's asking for all of the incomes of each of the household members, which one of those is the primary or the breadwinner. So I'll go ahead and leave that here. Any questions on monthly income before we move forward? All right, so we're going to go ahead and save and next here. And going up to the top, just that quickly, we have made it to dietary considerations. So as you can see, once you get the hang of it, it doesn't take that long to add a new client. It takes a whole lot longer when I narrate every step. But generally, this is going to be you having a client on the other end of your computer or perhaps on the other end of the phone, and you're just asking them some simple questions. So it's going to now ask me for dietary considerations. And this is also a configurable list. I've seen this done very beautifully where, as you can see, I've just played around here with it with the numbers 1 and 2. And down here, I've got the letter Z with a colon. What I love to see here is that they be organized by the type of consideration it is. There's a big difference between someone that has a life-threatening peanut allergy and someone who just doesn't care for mayonnaise, right? So you can list them as allergy, colon, or lifestyle, religious, colon, whatever the case may be, so that you can easily navigate this list as it will appear in alphabetical order. In my portal, dietary considerations is not required. So if they do not have any dietary considerations, I can simply save changes. And if they do, I can complete. If dietary considerations were required in my portal, there would be another option here that says none, so that you can make a selection even if they don't have any dietary considerations. But I'll go ahead and list a few things here. And this time, instead of clicking the Save and Next button, I'm going to touch Save Changes, and we're going to see a few things happen. Number one, all of the tabs will become green, and that is because we will have essentially completed the client profile by touching the Save or the Save and Next button on each of the 4 tabs of the profile, which means that the client profile will become active, and all of the actions that you could take with the client are now available. And then we'll also go back to the personal tab and discover some other things that have happened. So I'll go ahead and save changes here. And there we have it. Dietary considerations is blue. That is the tab that I am currently on. Everything else is green. That means that I can click anywhere I'd like and get to that profile. I'm sorry, get to that page. So I'm going to go back to the personal tab. As promised, that yellow banner, as we were seeing on every tab, is now gone. The status went from pending now to active. And there are a couple other colorful tiles that have shown up here. The last profile review is today. If you're interested in more about the profile review, you can see that in administrative settings webinar. And then the last visit date, there still is no activity, but we're getting ready to change that here pretty soon. Before we go into the visit, I'm going to do a little bit more with the household member that we've added here, and we're going to see some more functions that you have with this client. So we've already discovered that our client name is going to be in the upper right-hand corner, and we also know that we have our client ID here. But there is a drop-down and a few more options that I want to make you aware of. So I can mark this client as deceased. Just as in real life, this is an irreversible option, so we want to be very careful and not do this unless that is truly the case. But it is also a 3-click process, so kind of difficult to do a mistake. So drop down once to reveal your options, click number 2 to mark as deceased, and there still is going to be a warning asking if this is sure of something that you want to do. There is no real way to completely delete a client from the link to feed system, as that client will always be associated with some historical data. So marking a client as deceased essentially means that you will no longer be able to record any services for them, and it also means that you will no longer be able to search for them. If you want this client out of your view, but they are not deceased, there is a new option, and that is the archive client. So maybe the client is going to be out of town for several months, or they're just not going to be receiving services for whatever the reason. You can archive this client, but this is reversible. So if the client moves back into the area or once again is in need, unlike the deceased option here, you can get back to that client. And then the last thing I want to show you here at the top is this See Client in View Mode option. We'll notice that each one of these tabs, if I click on them, will have the full name of the tab. This is personal information. This is profile information. But as we know by now, the client profile consists of up to 4 tabs, and that might mean a bit of clicking if you're looking for something specific. So if we see the client in view mode, what that does is shows us a linear view of the client's profile so that we can see everything all in one nice clean page, which I love. All right. So I'm going to go back to the personal tab because that is where I find my household member information. So a few things that we've already noted here. We've got the name, relationship, gender identity, age, and date of birth. But there are some other tools that we're going to play around with here. First, we have the edit button. And so when I touch this edit button, it's going to pop back up with the same thing that we did to add the household member. And once again, this is not the client's full profile. This is just the minimum required information in order to become a household member. So if you want to change any of this minimum required information, you can. Maybe we want to change them from friend, give them a little bit of an upgrade here. We can do that. And I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. Scrolling back down to the bottom, there are a few other buttons here that we can play with. This first one, intersecting arrows, is going to switch this client's full profile. So once again, currently I am on white paper's profile. All of these tabs are asking questions specifically for white paper, with the exception of things like, oh, perhaps the address, which would be also applicable to the household member. But when we added this household member, we only added a few things: first name, last name, date of birth, and so on. So if for yellow paper, you want to get to their full profile, where you can see all of the tabs and you can see yellow paper up here at the top, there are a few ways to do that. I can search for them up here. I can go to client search and search for them here. I can go back to my dashboard and search for them here. They are a real client. Even though you added them as a household member, they are searchable. However, I'm going to go back to white paper's profile here. And instead of searching for them in that way, a nice little shortcut to get there is just by touching these intersecting arrows, which is going to switch to the client's full profile. And so now I see yellow paper in the upper right-hand corner. And if I go to, let's say, the profile tab, these questions are not completed because I completed them for white paper and not yellow paper. And so you can go through and add additional detail and fully complete this client's profile if you'd like. But I'm going to go back to the personal tab. And as a shortcut, I'm going to touch the intersecting arrows again. This will take me back to white paper's profile. All right, so we know that we can edit that minimum required household information. We know that we can switch to the client's full profile here. And then we also have this upward facing or arrow. This is to promote. So let's say that for some reason, yellow paper now is going to become the primary and white paper is going to become the household member. Essentially, this is how we change the hierarchy. I don't want to press this button now. It's actually going to spark a few more questions that I don't want to go through at this time, but just know that this is possible. I do recommend doing this if for some reason you need to archive the primary, or if the primary is getting ready to be marked as deceased. A great rule of thumb is to go ahead and promote the secondary before you do that, just to make this transition easy for you. And then lastly, we have the delete icon here, but the language is very clear with the hover over that this is not truly deleting the household member. As we know, there is no true way to delete a client from the link to feed system, but it's simply removing this person from the household. So perhaps this relationship status is no more, and yellow paper is going to be leaving this household. What that is going to do is put yellow paper in a household of one by themselves. You will still be able to search for them. You will still be able to record services for them. They will just be in their own household. So before I press delete here, I want to draw your attention once more to this little people icon, because we're getting ready to see that change in a bit. So this is a 2-click process to remove this client from the household. The language is very clear. Are you sure you wish to remove this member from the household? And I am going to say yes here. Now, when I remove them from the household, I'm still showing white paper's profile, but down here at the bottom, there are no longer any household members. Now, let's say that for some reason, white paper and yellow paper were able to work things out, and he is getting ready to rejoin the household. What I can do is I can go ahead and click add. And what I'm getting ready to do is trigger the link to feed duplicate checker. So I'm going to go ahead and add the information in the system. This might happen on purpose because you simply want to add someone back in the household. This might happen by complete accident because you were adding a client into the system and didn't realize that they were already there. But either way, the system is going to prevent you from adding a duplicate. Once I add a certain amount of information, I think I did January 1 there. There we go. It's going to say, hey, here's a possible duplicate. It's going to give you the client ID that's already in the system, the name, and their date of birth. Notice that there is absolutely nothing that you can do at this point besides touch the See More button. So when I touch See More, it's going to give me a little bit more information. Now, if you've got this client sitting just on the other side of your computer or perhaps on the phone, you can say, hey, I tried to add you to the system, and it looks like you're already in our system. Is this your address? Is this your date of birth? And if they say yes, that means that this is the client you're looking for, and you're going to say yes here. If they say no, it means that we've got a bit of a coincidence on our hands, which certainly happens. People share first and last names, people share date of births or the cities that they live in, and I can say no. Pressing no here is going to be the easiest way to get unintentional duplicates, or what we call dismissed duplicates in the system. So you definitely want to train your users to make sure that they ask this question and they touch yes if they need to. I think somewhere along the line, as we learned how to use computers, when pop-ups happened, we were just trained to say no, dismiss, or okay, and get back to what we were doing to hurry up and finish our task. But in this instance, by saying no in a rush, we're actually creating more work where it's going to prompt us to basically recreate a profile that's already in the system. So once again, I was trying to add yellow paper into the household. The system said, hey, they are already in the system. Is this the person that you're looking for? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Now there's going to be another question here, and that is to link or move the client. And I'm going to choose to link, and I'll show you what that means. It's going to ask for that relationship status once again, and I'll save. And it's asking to link. All right, so I'm still on White Paper's profile, and notice that that little people icon went away. I now have this little chain link. So let's talk about the difference between the two. When you first add a client or a household member, it's going to give you that people icon. That's what we call a move. That is a full-time household member. So that is spouses, that is a child, whatever the case may be. The linked button means that this is a partial or a part-time household member. So that might be a child who shares joint custody between two parents. Essentially what it means is that this client can be linked to another household. So because I have linked yellow paper here, I can also link yellow paper to another household. Any questions on the options that we have here with the ID, client view, or the tools related with a household member? All right. So with the remaining time that we have a completed client profile. We've gone through all of the tabs and the information housed on each one, keeping in mind that you have the ability to configure what questions you ask, if it will be required or not, and a lot of the drop down or multiple selection answers as well. In today's training, we are going to skip ahead to services. So if you're interested in TFAP or CSFP, you can join our Understanding Commodities. The assessments and goals features are currently available in our premium package, but we're going to skip ahead to services here. Now, after you have added a client into the system for the first time, 9 times out of 10, if you are searching for a client, that is because you're getting ready to record a service. And you are going to get to determine what the services are that you offer at your organization. So here I have quite a few tiles here, and each one of these tiles are associated to what we call programs. You might call them different services. So this is where you would have your pantry program, your TFAP, CSFP, financial assistance, SNAP applications, whatever the case may be. When that client comes, depending on why they are here and what you are doing for them, will determine which one of these buttons that you press. Before we go into that, I want to scroll up a bit. We have this household summary box that I love. Once again, that client profile, because we do collect so much data, is going to be on 4 different pages. So when you're on the services page, you will get to determine what is in the household summary box. This is your client at a glance. In this profile, I want to know the size, if there are any anonymous members, the breakdown of each one. We also have our dietary considerations, primary income, and the household social programs. So this allows you to see who this client is at a glance without going through each one of these individual tabs, or even without going into the view mode. But I can collapse and expand this. And then here I have all of my programs. So I'm going to go into my mobile pantry visit here. And this is the simplest program that we have. It is up to you what information you even collect on a program. So on this pantry visit, at the bare minimums, it's going to have the date, which will default to today, but can be backdated. Perhaps there was a power outage yesterday, no Wi-Fi, and you wanted to say this was a visit from yesterday. Totally acceptable. But it does default to today. In the pantry program, it is going to default to all members of the household, but we know that Yellow Paper is a linked member and maybe they are not receiving services from this particular pantry visit. I can deselect. And then I have some additional notes here. So if I need to leave any notes specific to this visit, I can. So once I have recorded that visit, I'll go ahead and save. And by recording this visit, we are getting so much data. We know that a household of 2 received pantry. We know the age, the ethnicity, the marital status, the address, everything associated. So each time you touch one of these buttons and you record a visit, you are getting over time the data that you need, and you'll be able to run reports on that information. Now, that was a very simple pantry visit. There are more things that can be added. So you can add the appointment feature to any one of your programs, which means that you are choosing an appointment. So here I can say I want a visit between Wednesday and Saturday, and I can search. I can see all of the available times, and you get to configure what your caseload or your availability looks like. And let's say I want to schedule this for the 5th at 10:10. So right now the status of this is pending. Here are some other options of things you can add to your recorded visit. What are the reasons for your visit, meaning what has brought you here today? Maybe you don't want to ask that question. This can be turned off. It still defaults to the household members all being selected, but once again, you can deselect as need be. So we saw that bare minimum where you just simply touch the program, touch save, maybe leave notes. This is showing you 2 more options that you have. Number 1 is appointments. And number 2, the ability to record the individual items and or services that you provided them with. And you will get to choose if you want foods provided, what that looks like. That might look like meat, dairy, produce. That might look like chicken, steak, shrimp. That might look like breasts, legs, wings. You will get to choose exactly how specific or how broad you want to be with what you are serving. In the items, that might look like diapers, sanitary products, socks. It might look like diaper size 8, or whatever the case may be. You'll also get to determine whether these items are required. So maybe they can simply save the visit just like this, or maybe it is required that they provide some sort of food, and so you'll have to go in and say what those things are. So the foods and items provided do not have to go in conjunction with an appointment-based program. You could have a simple walk-in program where you list the foods and items that you provided. This is just a program that has all the bells and whistles turned on. But notice that I have scheduled this for the 5th at 10:10 a.m. The status of this appointment is pending. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. It's going to take me back to the services page. We've got our appointments here. Or I'm sorry, our different programs here. When I scroll down a little bit further, it's going to show me all of the visits. So this list will grow over time with the client. We had a visit today. It was just a simple mobile pantry visit. We weren't recording the foods and items, and I could come in here to view, edit, or delete this visit. But here is the appointment that we made for the 5th, which is coming up. So let's pretend that we are fast forwarding to the 5th. I'm going to go ahead and touch the edit button here. And on the 5th, I'll be able to take this status from pending now to collected. Now, when I do this, I'm going to get some pretty angry colors because it's going to say, hey, you can't collect for something that was scheduled for tomorrow. But in a perfect world, when it was actually tomorrow, I would change that status to collected. There are those angry colors. It's highlighting the date. This doesn't make sense. But I can go ahead and save that. I'll go ahead and cancel for now. So just so you know, after that client profile is completed, you will get to record services for this client. That could be any type of program you want. These buttons here are going to be configured for your network, and then you'll get to choose how much data even you want to collect per each service, whether that is just, yes, they came for a visit and that's it, or I'm scheduling them for tomorrow and tomorrow I will mark it as collected, or yes, they came for a visit and these are the foods and the items that I provided them with. The more information you include on the program, the more you'll have available for reporting. Any questions on recording visits before we move forward? All right, now with the remaining time, I want to talk about something called a forced profile review. I kind of breezed over it earlier with the last profile review. By the way, notice that our last visit date is now today. If I were to come in here and turn that other visit to collected tomorrow, this date would update. But I want to talk about the forced profile review with the remaining time that we have. So you've probably encountered this in some capacity when you're calling into customer service. The representative may say something along the lines of, it looks like it's been a while since we verified your information. Can you please confirm that this is still the best phone number to reach you at? Is this still your physical address? So on and so forth. They're not asking you for any additional information as much as confirming that what they have in their system is still up to date. A link to feed will do that same thing, and you will get to determine the frequency of when that is. Most of our accounts do that at 365 days, but you can set it to be more or less frequent than that per your needs. So if a client is in a forced profile review, what that is going to mean is that it is going to appear as there was a new client again. All of the tabs will be grayed out, but none of the information is lost. All of the information will still be on each page, but with the tabs grayed out, it is asking you essentially to review the information on each page, preferably with the client in mind or in front of you, and to touch save and next until you get to the dietary considerations page, and then you'll be right back at being able to record a visit. So that is going to happen up to generally 365 days, but once again, you can change that for your preferences. But there are also other things that are going to spark a forced profile review. Just to mention a few, if you were to merge two duplicates, that's going to spark a forced profile review. If you were to remove a client from a household, that's going to spark a forced profile review. And if you were to change the hierarchy as well, which is why I didn't want to play with that tool a little bit earlier. So there are a few things that will spark a forced profile review, and it's basically any action that Link to Feed deems as a, since you've done this, I wonder if this information is still up to date. Now, as I went through these, you might have noticed a theme here with didn't ask, don't know, and prefer not to answer. These three are going to show up on every single section for the most part. Didn't ask means that I did not ask this client the question. Don't know means I asked the question, but the client does not know. And prefer not to answer means I asked and the client does not want to disclose this information. So along the lines of a forced profile review, we are trying our best to enforce data integrity. If this question is important enough for you as a network to include it on your profile, we want to make sure that your users are actually asking the question. So once again, on a forced profile review, none of your information will be lost. It will all still be there. You're just simply going to have to touch save and next on each tab in order to reactivate the profile, if you will. The exception to that is didn't ask. If didn't ask was selected, meaning that the person who created this profile did not ask the question last time, this will clear out. It is going to prompt them to have to ask that question upon a forced profile review, hopefully to get an answer. You're also going to be able to pull data to see how often didn't ask is being used. Maybe that means that you need to provide some sensitivity training or talk about a politically correct way to ask a certain question. Maybe that means that you need to express to your users why this question is important to you, or maybe it's just an indication that it's not important and you need to turn it off. But for a forced profile review, you're going to save and next for all of your information is there, with the exception of anything that was left and didn't ask. If you didn't ask it last time, we want you to ask it this time. And you can still choose didn't ask again, but the hope is that that person will then ask that question and be able to get more data for you on the customer. Any other questions that I can answer for you? I have taken you through everything that I plan to today, from adding a client profile to a household member to recording services in the first profile review. We've got just a few moments left here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It has truly been my pleasure to work with all of you today and train you. I am going to actually, with the remaining time, I'll go ahead and put the link to a previously recorded webinar on the same topic here in the chat. And I'll also make this one available, I think, on YouTube as well. So thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day. If you want that link in YouTube, just hold tight and I'll have that in chat for everyone here shortly.